Today we're going to begin by looking at some of the causes of the French Revolution. And this is not going to be an extensive, all-exhaustive list, but we're going to specifically focus on the social structure and the social issues in France and how that's going to lead us to revolution. But one of the first things that we want to do is define this term revolution. It's something that's thrown around. We hear a lot about it today, given what's happened in the Middle East with the Arab Spring uprisings. So what we want to do is actually define this term. So revolution is a total or radical change in government structure or organization. One of the most familiar ones that you've probably covered already in history is the American Revolution, when the United States overthrew the British monarchy and declared their independence. Very shortly after the American Revolution, the French Revolution occurred in 1789. So what we're going to do today is look, like I said before, specifically at the social structure in France and how that contributes to the outbreak of revolution in 1789. If you take a snapshot of France, 1789, a lot of the feudal system was left over from the end of the Middle Ages. So French society was made up of three groups or estates. The top estate, or the first estate, was known as the clergy. The second estate was known as the nobility. And then the third estate was everybody else. And this is including people from merchants, lawyers, doctors, all the way down to the peasants. So what I want to do is take a couple minutes just to go over a little bit of information about each one of these groups and how the inequalities amongst these groups can begin leading us down the road to revolution. So like I said before, the first estate is the clergy. So out of a total population of 27 million in France, 130,000 fit the clergy. So these are priests, cardinals, bishops. Those would all fall into this category. So you're talking about a really tiny percentage of the population. Yet, being such a small percentage, they owned actually a fairly large chunk of the land. So 10% of the land went to the church. So this is 10% of the land that they don't need to pay taxes on, that they own outright. The second group of estate was the nobility, and this is about twice the size of the first estate, and they own, once again, a huge chunk of land. So 25 to 30% of the land in France is then owned by the nobility. And these are people that are born into this position. They're aristocratic. They have special privileges and titles, the dukes and the duchesses. So a lot of the privileges that they have are from birth. It's not merit-based. They didn't do something spectacular to earn this position. They got it because their dad was a noble, and their grandfather was a noble, and their great-grandfather was a noble. So the positions in society that had sway, that could impact decisions, those are held by the nobility and the clergy. The big sticking point, though, when we start to look at the social structure of France, is that the first and the second estates did not have to pay taxes. So they are exempt from taxation. And these are two of the groups that are fairly wealthy. So if these two groups are not paying taxes, that means the burden of taxation is falling on the third estate. So this is everybody else. So the 98% of the population is comprised of the third estate. A majority of the 98% were actually peasants. And these are individuals who, a lot of them are dirt poor, have a hard time feeding themselves and making enough money to feed themselves, let alone pay taxes. So life for people in the third estate is not great. They lack representation a lot of the time. They are paying a large amount of taxes. They don't have enough money to buy bread, their chief staple of their diet. So life's not great. One of the more influential classes that's on the rise in the third estate is a group known as the bourgeoisie, or the middle class. And they're going to become a really important component of the French Revolution when it breaks out in 1789. So this is just a really good visual, or one visual that kind of helps you see the social structure in France. in the hierarchy that existed, because the top of the hierarchy is the first estate, or the clergy, followed by second estate, and then all of those individuals that are comprised in the third estate. And then for my visual people out there, this is another representation of kind of the inequality that existed as far as the amount of population that there was in France. And you can see from the first pie chart on the left that the biggest chunk of this is comprised of the commoners, the artisans, the merchants, the blacksmiths, the bakers. When you look at the graph in the middle, you can see that, they do own a majority of the land, but if we're talking about proportion to their population, it is unequal. And then in the last pie chart, you only see the third estate, because they are paying all of the taxes in France. And unfortunately, a lot of individuals in the third estate do not have the means to pay the taxes. So this is setting up for problems for King Louis XVI in 1789, and we're going to talk about this in the next video, and how this social situation leads us down the road to revolution in 1789.